This is Street Knowledge with Chris Graham.
Welcome to the podcast. Chris Graham and Scott German. We're going to talk ACC basketball. We're going to do an ACC basketball preview. And yes, we realize that they've been playing for 2 months now, but the ACC season has started already. Technically, last night, Virginia Tech beating Notre Dame. There's another game tomorrow night, and then this weekend, everybody will be in action. So this is when it feels like ACC basketball really starts. So it's almost like we call the pre-conference season the preseason, and now we're playing for real. And so, yes, Scott, we know where, we've seen these teams play. Some teams have played tough schedules. Some have not. Virginia is one of those who've not. And we have a decent feel for where we are with this 2018-2019 season. And so what are your first thoughts as we get ready to break down the ACC here at this midpoint of the season?
Well, Tony said in the post-game press conference Saturday that you kind of break the season down into three stages or three phases. And phase one, despite guys like us that want to be critical of just about everything we can possibly find to be critical of, Virginia is perfect. They won all the games. So you can say what you want. We talked about it during the game Saturday that maybe the schedule wasn't quite as tough as some others, but still, you look back and they played Wisconsin, they played Maryland, they played VCU, a decent Marshall team that went further in the NCAA tournament that we went last year. Hate to keep beating that mule, but the facts are they went into the second round. We dispatched them pretty easily Saturday. So, we did what we had to do. We're perfect. We're undefeated going into the ACC schedule. But we all know this is where the rubber meets the road because there's no easy games. I mean, there may be some weak teams in the conference, but they're still going to give it their best shot. And we've got as many road games as we have home games now, so no longer beefing up the schedule with home games. So, I think we are ready. I would have liked to see us develop a little more depth, but we may have seen that coming around Saturday with Jay Huff getting some extended minutes. Brody really giving him some praise. So, it's time to, notch the belt up a little bit, get ready for some serious basketball.
Yeah. I don't think we're ready, and I don't think we did what we needed to do. They won the games, which is great. You're supposed to win the games. That's the first goal every time you go out there and play. But and I'm not even faulting the schedule. I think the schedule, when it was scheduled, was a good schedule. South Carolina made the Final Four 2 years ago. They're not good this year, but they made the Final Four 2 years ago. You can't fault that you put them on the schedule, you play them on the road, and they're not so good when you play them on the road. Virginia actually has 2 true road wins, which is 2 more than Duke has and 2 more than Kansas has. So, I mean, you gotta give credit where credit's due as far as that goes. But I just and it's again not the fault of the scheduling, but and Virginia's going to have obviously Saturday is a really tough test with a top 10 team, Florida State coming in, and I'm not so worried about that though. In the sense of toughening up, because I think Virginia fans hopefully by this stage realize these games are great. These games are important. You want to win every time you go out there, but the games that really matter are the ones that start around this year, around March 20th or so, because the ACC tournament, everything is starting kind of a week later this year than they have in past years. So those are the ones that matter. And so, Virginia's going to lose some games in the ACC. The ACC's tough. There's several really good teams this year, and Virginia's not going to go 20-1 in the ACC like they did last year. And so the lack of tough games at this stage, that's not a concern for me. Saturday's going to be a tough game. Virginia Tech's going to be tough. You've got 2 with Virginia Tech. You got 2 with Duke. You got to play at North Carolina. You got to play Syracuse. You got to play all these teams. You got to play them. So that'll toughen Virginia up for the games that matter in March. But no, I don't know that they're tough yet. They've only played a couple of contests that were really good tests. They passed them, but I'm concerned about the lack of depth. The players that are playing are what we're seeing out of this group. This is as good a group as we've seen from 1 to 7. I wish there were an 8, maybe even a 9. I wish they'd been tested a little more, but they will be soon. So not too concerned about that. And the Florida State game on Saturday should be a really good test for both teams, particularly from our perspective for Virginia. Looking forward to seeing how that turns out.
Yeah, that's going to be a really good test Saturday. But Florida State's a very athletic team. I think they're fairly well coached. I'm not always sold on Leonard Hamilton, but I think this year they're just got so many athletes. You know, you looking back at what you said. First of all, we said this in the ACC. Well, Virginia almost did. For Fluke loss at home to Tech, they would have. But realistically, you know, it's such a balanced league. To think that somebody's going to run away with it with 16, 17 wins, that's probably very unlikely again this year. And as we learned last year, it really doesn't matter what your gaudy record might be at the end of the season. It's how prepared you are, how ready you are to turn that switch on when the NCAA tournament starts. And we found out last week 30 wins didn't really mean a whole lot. As far as depth, stories last night, and we're talking about Virginia maybe being 7 or 8 players, and that's it. But you know ACC basketball as well as anybody I know, Chris. On the top of your head, who goes deep? Who has more depth than Virginia in the ACC? You can't say who, because they may have less depth. So, what teams around the conference do go deeper than 7 or 8?
Florida State, for example, the team we're going to see on Saturday, they'll go 10 deep and get a lot of minutes out of a lot of guys. And it's not even I don't even want to compare what Virginia does to anybody, because Virginia plays harder than anybody, and that's what has to be concerning if you're a Virginia fan. This team in the past has had 8 or 9 guys in the rotation, and still kind of fizzled down the stretch because, you know, I say this a lot, but, you know, when Syracuse plays their 2-3 zone, when they're on the defensive side of the floor, they're standing in a spot. I mean, they're moving a little bit, et cetera, so they're not standing there stationary, but they're not moving like the Virginia guys do on defense. You know, anybody watches Virginia play defense, the guards are on top of their guys. The bigs have to both guard their guys and also help hedge on post screens or screen and rolls. They got a post-to-post double. The perimeter guys have to be back behind those post-to-post doubles to cut off passing lanes. I mean, there's constant motion. And then on offense, you know, you have some teams out there that do a lot of iso ball, which is a guy dribbling, and then there might be a guy on the same side of the floor, and then 3 guys on the other side of the floor clearing out. Those guys aren't moving. Virginia's offense, when Virginia's got the ball, they're moving the whole time. The guards are running off screens. The bigs are setting screens. It's constant motion. So for 40 minutes out there of game action, 2 hours out in the court, they're moving. Virginia's moving the entire time. And so you have to have depth. And that's a concern. I think 7 guys is a concern. Only having 7 right now, you know, yeah, Jay Huff played 13 minutes in the win over Marshall. But for me, you know, I'd love to see Jay Huff play more. I'd love to see Marco Anthony get some more playing time in the backcourt. But I'm not sure that they're going to be utilized that way. I'm not sure they're ready if they were to be utilized that way. And, you know, that's a concern. Now, that said, Virginia 1 through 7 is as good as anybody in the country. It's just a matter of can they sustain how Virginia needs to play. You know, 18 ACC games, you know, 1, 2, or 3 ACC tournament games. You're talking about, you know, it'll be game number 34 when they tip it up in early mid-March in the NCAA tournament. Will we have legs left and health left and everything else to be able to win those games? That is a concern, and I think it's a concern every year, but I think particularly this year.
So what you're saying is that the style of tempo, the tempo that Virginia plays on both ends of the floor, especially defensively, it's more important for Virginia to have some added depth than maybe other teams like Syracuse. And I agree with that to an extent, but you know, again, we're starting ACC play, and even Florida State, I think you have to do a reset because what we've seen other teams top to bottom do from the first week in November to the first week in January really doesn't mean a whole lot until you reset that button and you can start seeing how these teams play when we're beating up on one another, when we're playing in Durham on a Tuesday night, and then coming back on Saturday, or playing on a Thursday night and coming back on Saturday. So I'm not so sure we've got a good indication fully of how deep anyone is until we get 4 or 5 games into the ACC schedule.
I would argue the other side, Florida State, actually they went to the Elite Eight last year, and I think what they do, I don't think they play possum, but Hamilton will play. He actually has 11 guys averaging double-digit minutes right now, not 10. I was wrong by one. He got to the Elite Eight last year with a team that I didn't think should have even gotten an NCAA tournament bid. They got in by the skin of their teeth, and they still had something left. They didn't play well in Brooklyn at all. The ACC tournament in Brooklyn, they got skunked by Louisville. That's why I thought they weren't going to make. I didn't think they were going to get a bid. They got beat on, was it Tuesday, or I guess it was Wednesday? They got beat on Wednesday in that tournament. Didn't even play past Wednesday. They made the Elite Eight because now for lots of reasons I think that strength in numbers is a key, and Hamilton has the long vision. In my opinion, he's got the long vision. Now that said, Duke will play 6 or 7 guys. They don't play as hard as Virginia does, but they'll play 6 or 7 guys. Syracuse will probably play 5 guys. They might play a 6th guy, but they're not going to play many more than that. And they'll play for a while, but they play that 2-3 zone. Virginia's different, in my opinion. We watch them all the time. They play harder, and they pride themselves on playing harder. That's what the difference is. And I'm just thinking long view. The ACC season, Virginia will be fine. Virginia's going to go 13-5, 14-4 in the ACC, somewhere around that range. That might be enough to win, and I think it will. I think 14 is probably the cutoff to win the ACC regular season this year. But I'm not so worried about the ACC regular season. I'm not even worried about Charlotte. We're going to be in Charlotte, but I'm not so worried about that. It's when they tip them up later on, and I just hope we have enough legs left. And I'm worried mightily that with 7 guys playing your primary minutes, that's not a good recipe for what we're looking forward to. What we really want to see out of this team, folks, listen to this podcast. We don't, we want to win 30 games and all that stuff, but we want to win it. We want to go to a Final Four. We want to win a national championship. And that long view, I am a little concerned. I'm just being honest about that.
Well, and I think it's warranted, but again, I think we've got to do a reset. Let's see what happens once we start playing for real come Saturday. Hopefully Huff will get some minutes. We'll develop into that extra depth off the bench. Anthony has really been a disappointment. I was looking for him to be a valuable contributor. I mean, so far he hasn't. Now, whether he gets opportunities from here on out, we don't know, because those markets that aren't going to really be that. They're not going to be that big. So I don't know whether his way out of rotation or not. Not the tournament. And we found out last year, being a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament really not that more prestige than anything. I wonder if the ACC basketball tournament, if you look at the grind of what's currently the ACC regular season, and then next year I believe it's going to jump 2 more games, or it's going to go to 20 eventually. I wonder if the ACC basketball tournament, for those teams that know they're a lock for the NCAA tournament, I wonder if that's going to be approached with maybe the same mentality that the ACC baseball tournament is, that you wonder how much emphasis some of these teams put on winning that tournament, as opposed to maybe losing early on and having fresher legs when the NCAA tournament starts. Baseball, you wonder if it's worth blowing through your pitching staff playing in the ACC all the way to make the ACC championship game, and then having to rearrange that pitching staff for the upcoming week when the NCAA tournament starts. Do you think that the ACC basketball tournament will ever take on that mentality?
The hard part about that is you want to be playing your best basketball then too. So you don't want to go lose and you don't want to tank or anything else. But yeah, I mean, maybe do you manage your minutes differently? It didn't seem like Tony Bennett managed his minutes differently. He wanted to win that thing, and he did. And I don't know that Virginia winning that tournament, playing a third game that tournament, was why they lost the first round against UMBC. Why they lost was in large part. I mean, it's weird to say this, but losing one guy, DeAndre Hunter, not being there, certainly had an impact. It was the absence of a player, not necessarily the legs left or whatever else, that kept them from winning that game. Now, whether or not Virginia, if they have a healthy DeAndre Hunter, goes and wins the tournament, of course, we'll never know. But now, when Duke had to win 4 games the year before to win a tournament, and of course Carolina had to play 4 games last year. They lost that last game, but they had to play that 4th game to get to to play in the final. They had to win an extra game to get to the championship game. That had to be a factor. 4 games in a week. That, you think about that, but there's a trade-off there. I mean, do you want to? You don't want to go and lose. You don't want to be playing bad basketball, but maybe should you manage your minutes differently? And then, so that's hard. You play the games. I mean, we all made fun last year of was the Big Ten played their tournament a week ahead of schedule because they wanted to play so bad in New York, and Madison Square Garden wasn't available because of the Big East long-term relationship with Madison Square Garden. So the Big Ten played theirs a whole week early, and we all thought, well, yeah, look at this. They're not even gonna, they're gonna be off for 9 or 10 days before the everybody else is, and a week and a half before the NCAA tournament. There's no chance this team's going to be cold by the time they play. Michigan made the final, so maybe that wasn't such a bad idea. They had a chance to regroup and collect themselves. But it's a good point, Scott. I mean, I don't know that you want to go out there and lose, but yeah, you're putting it up to 120 minutes of wear and tear, maybe more than that, on your team's legs, and maybe that's a factor when you start playing the next week. So it's definitely a question.
I don't think it's as much as you tank it. I think it would be you kind of manage the minutes, and if you're able to manage the minutes and still win, so be it. I don't think anyone's going to go out, especially not elite level teams with competitive elite coaches like Mike Krzyzewski or Roy Williams or Tony Bennett, and turn the throttle down a little bit. But they might manage the minutes a little bit more and set some guys a little longer. If they can win doing that, fine. They lose, so be it. They're still trying to keep those legs fresh. That's the only thing that I worry about, or don't worry about, but that's one of the things I'm concerned about is when this ACC regular season goes to a mind-boggling 20 games. I just cannot fathom playing what the benefit of playing a 20-game regular season schedule will be. It's I can remember dating myself when the regular season was 14 games. Now, of course, the conference is smaller, but 14 to 20, that's just going to be, or 18 when we're playing now to 20. I just wonder if that's going to affect the way teams that are already a cinch to make the NCAA tournament. That's going to maybe alter the way they look at the ACC tournament. Is it going to devalue the ACC tournament?
Well, in ACC tournament, and what about February and January? I mean, that's you see a lot of NBA teams doing this now. The Golden State Warriors didn't all of a sudden go from being a 73-win team to a team that's maybe going to be on pace for 55 or 56 wins this year because of talent drop-off. They got the same players that have won 3 of the last 4 championships, but now they're measuring themselves a bit. They're not trying to lose, but Steve Kerr's managing the minutes, and they're fine with that. I'm looking at Virginia's minutes right now, and now we're starting ACC play with only 2 guys currently averaging over 30 minutes a game. Ty Jerome, 30.7. Kyle Guy, 32.8, actually leads the team in minutes per game. DeAndre Hunter at 28.3. Kihei Clark, he started 4 games. He's been off the bench the other 8. He's averaging 27.8, so he's 4th in the team on minutes. You got Salt at 20.6. You've got Diakite at 17.6, and then you go all the way down Jay Huff at 9.6, and he's only played 9 games. So the minutes have been managed well to this point. You look at last year for this team, and you had it was a different situation in terms of minutes. Of course, we're getting ready to go in ACC play, and you'll see the minutes for the starters will go up a bit. Trying to get this real quick here from the roster. And per game last year, actually 3 guys averaging over 30 minutes a game. Guy, Devin Hall, and Ty Jerome. And then Wilkins at 27.5. And that was some of that was ineffectiveness. As down the stretch, more of those minutes went to DeAndre Hunter. So managing the minutes will be important. It may be not even a factor of the ACC tournament. You may see it more through the regular season. And that's why I wonder about that from a Virginia perspective. If Tony Bennett will manage the minutes more, I'm a little afraid with the bench being shorter. You may actually see Kyle and Jerome, particularly Kyle and Ty, playing more minutes than even did last year when both averaged over 30 a game too. So it's a concern. This is the inside basketball stuff. I guess that's what folks listen to us for, is to hear us moan about minutes played. But we're looking for those answers as to why we haven't been to a Final Four with these great teams. This is year 6 of this great era of UVA basketball. We're still looking for our first Final Four. And it's not because the talent. This is the most talented team maybe Virginia's ever had. You look, when I wrote my ACC basketball preview column today, one thing you look for when you look for teams that are Final Four worthy, national championship worthy in this day and age of advanced metrics, the KenPom.com offensive and defensive efficiency numbers. I think it's something like the last 5 national champions have been ranked in the top 11 of both offense and defensive efficiency nationally. So that's an important demarcation line. The number 11, for some reason, is an important one. And this Virginia team, now last year's Virginia team, of course, was ranked first in defensive efficiency. We know that. That's almost every year thing for UVA basketball. But offense was ranked just 30th nationally. When I say just 30th, there's 353 teams. But 30th ain't 11th. 30th is 30th. This year's team is ranked 5th defensively, so a little not very far, but a little notch down defensively, but 8th on offense. They're ranked in the top 8 they're ranked in the top 11 in both categories. This suggests that this is a national championship level team. The other Virginia team, there was only one other team in this era, this current the 6-year ongoing era of great UVA basketball, where both of the Virginia units, offense and defense, were ranked in the top 11. And that was the 2016 team that we know lost in the Elite 8, had that game won to go to the Final Four, the Malcolm Brogdon, Anthony Gill, Mike Tobey, Leonard Parentes team. And so we know that was a championship level team, just, something bad happened in the last 10 minutes of that game. But this team is actually a tick better than that team. And so, hey, that's what the numbers suggest. The efficiency number suggests this is a team that's on par or just a little bit better than that great team from a couple years ago.
Well, and we also know that the reason that this team is so much higher ranked as far as the statistical, the analytics, offensively, this team's got more weapons offensively. This is this is Tony's most offensive-oriented team. There's 4 or 5 scorers out on the floor for his disposal. So we knew that this was going to be a better offensive team, and I don't think dropping down to 5th, still, again, we're doing a reset here on Saturday when we start playing ACC teams. Then that's when those numbers really start taking on a meaning. So this is a very well-rounded team that anything less than a Final Four is certainly going to be looked at as a disappointing season.
Yeah, I think the hallmark of this team, because I'm thinking about that 2016 team, and of course that was the team that had gone to a Sweet 16, went to an Elite 8 with a blip in between. The one difference that team had was it had a great post scorer, not a good, but a great post scorer in Anthony Gill. This team doesn't have a great post scorer, but what it has versatility that team did not have. We noted this, Scott, during the win over the win over Marshall on Monday, that you would see Jack Salt check out of the game and Kihei Clark check in for him. And the reason you can do that is, this year the guy replacing Isaiah Wilkins in the starting lineup is DeAndre Hunter, who's looked at as a lottery pick in the upcoming draft if he comes out after his redshirt sophomore season. He's a 6'8" guy who can play. He can bring the ball up the court. He can run the point for you, and he can play center for you. He can play all 5 positions for this team, and he's got that versatility. Braxton Key, who's still coming off the bench for this team, he has similar versatility. He can play all 5 positions. Ty Jerome's a 6'5" point guard who can post up and score. He can guard post when opposing teams try to post their guards up. He's got great post defensive skills. Even Kihei Clark at 5'9", I noticed that Marshall was trying to, with John Elmore, their preseason second or third team All-American guard, depending on which service you believe in, they were trying to post him up on Kihei, and Kihei held his own in the post against him and was part of that effort where Elmore only went 4 of 17 from the floor. DeAndre Hunter doing a lot of that damage defensively. So it's a team that is very versatile. And so, and Mamadi Diakite is starting again for this team, and he's a guy who can guard big guards. He can certainly guard the post. He can guard both positions in the post. So I think it's the versatility of this team that is different from any of the previous teams that Tony's had here. Because, when you can sub in 5'9", 150 for 6'10", 250, that tells you, and you could shuffle the other guys around and have everything covered. There was at least one instance, Scott, when we pointed it out, there was a 5-guard lineup against Marshall, and that was a pretty good lineup for Virginia in that game. So this team's versatility, I think, is what makes it different from any other team Tony's had.
Yeah, for sure. When we saw that happen Saturday, I had to do a little double think. Just kept reminding myself that it a little subtle reminder that I'm not a spring chicken anymore. The old saying, it's not your father's style of basketball. What's not even my style of what I'm used to seeing when you substitute a 5'9" player for a 6'10" or a 6'11" player. You got to kind of shake your head and think, what did I just see? But again, that's just the way Tony plays. That's his style. That's the versatility that he's got to move players around. And that, I think, is going to bode well for this team as we go down the stretch. We're going to have, we're going to see different defensive schemes against us this year, but I believe we're going to be the chess match, we're going to be one move ahead of most of our opponents because of the versatility that Tony has with the players that are going to be on the floor. We've got that ability to take some team strategies that they're going to use against defensively and make them start over again and come up with something different because we've seen it. We haven't played that many really good opponents this year, but we have played enough to see that we present a lot of matchup problems for teams, and I think you're going to see that play itself out more times than not as we embark on the ACC schedule.
I wanted to look at some of the other teams in the ACC. We talked a lot about Virginia here in the podcast, and looking at the rest of the conference, I kind of gave my pre-ACC season look at where teams kind of shake out. And to me, right now, there's a demarcation line after you get to the 6th team. I look at Duke and Virginia. Of course, I'm using KenPom.com numbers here. They're 1 and 2 in KenPom.com. Virginia Tech is number 7. North Carolina is number 8. Florida State is number 17. NC State is number 21. In the AP and coaches polls, it's actually Florida State 9, Virginia Tech 10. Carolina's somewhere in the mid-teens, and State's a little lower. But those 6 teams are what we've seen so far. They're clearly the head and shoulders of this league. Then I call the next group the maybes. Syracuse is 9-4. They've had some ups and downs, but they're going to be fine. Syracuse is going to be fine. They brought everybody back from last year. They're going to be fine when they get through ACC play. Clemson's 10-3. I'm surprised. I thought they would have had a little bit better start to this season. I think that they've got some work to do. Louisville with new coach, they're 9-4. Miami at 8-4, but they played a pretty weak schedule to be 8-4. I think that's a little surprising from this group at Miami. Notre Dame's 10-4, already a loss in ACC play last night. They struggled to beat Coppin State this past weekend. And then Pitt is surprising. They're 10-3, and their KenPom.com number is 84. And we're going to see that change a bit, but that's based on efficiency and that's based on strength of schedule and everything else. So surprising start for Pitt, and we'll see how that works out. The outside looking in group is Georgia Tech, Boston College, Wake Forest. Wake Forest is ranked 159 out of 353 teams in the KenPom.com numbers, and Danny Manning's got to be on his last leg. So, but to me, there's that line, and I think Syracuse, Clemson, probably maybe Louisville are teams that can be NCAA tournament teams out of that middle group of 6. And but they're clearly, to me, there's a top group of 6, and that top group of 6 even has a top 3, and to me, that's Duke, Virginia, and North Carolina. And I think for Duke and Virginia, it's Final Four and bust or bust. Carolina might be, I don't know if it's Final Four or bust for Carolina this year. They lost a lot of veteran guys from last year, still kind of feeling themselves around. But, and Virginia Tech and Florida State can surprise. They might be Sweet 16 teams this year. So there's a lot of top heaviness to this ACC, but those top teams are really, really good.
Yeah, I think if you look at the ACC, I don't know how well the middle of the pack's going to be. Few teams that are going to just kind of take turns rising up to that 7, 8, 9 spot. But there's clearly some division. There's some division between the top 2 teams, I believe. We have to see it clearly the top 2, 3, 4, 5. Virginia Tech, Florida State, and then you've got the bottom rung of the conference, and those are the teams that are probably going to be looking for new coaches next year. Wake Forest for sure, and Pitt, or not Pitt, but Georgia Tech. So it's kind of I wouldn't say it's a haves and have-nots conference, but there's clearly an elite. And then there's clearly a group of pretty good teams, and then there's a couple of 3 teams that are just bad ACC teams.
From what we're looking at right now, and we're not, the season's getting started, ACC season getting started. It's Virginia and Duke at the top, and they play a home and home for the first time in a few years. They're playing, home and home this year. So we'll get 2 of these matchups, and I'm looking forward to that. But here's the stakes of this. I mean, we talk about seeding not mattering and such, but it does matter in this one sense. If current trends play out, they're ranked 1 and 2 in the coaches poll right now. Duke 1, Virginia 2. If this plays out the way it could and the way we think it will, what they're playing for here, they would both play in Columbia, South Carolina. The way the NCAA tournament does its groupings for tournament games. They would both be in Columbia, South Carolina for first and second round games because that's the nearest pod for the top seeds in the ACC. But what you're playing for then is if you win those first 2 games, you're playing for that number 1 seed in the East Regional, which this year is in Washington, D.C. And so really those 2 games come down to is positioning for Washington, D.C. Sweet 16. Basically, if you're Virginia and you're the number 1 seed. Now, again, we've said seeds don't matter, but here's where it does. If you're the number 1 seed in the East region, theoretically, the furthest you go away until the Final Four is Columbia, South Carolina. You could potentially play Sweet 16 Elite 8 2.5 hours from home. So that's what the stakes are for those 2 games. And we know those games are going to be good. It's going to be the young guys against the old guys, and the flashy guys versus the guys who play a great system and play it well. But then that's the stakes. It's all those matchups plus who gets to be the number 1 seed in Washington D.C.
Yeah, that is important. So that might be a reason that some of these teams keep the hammer down, keep the through the regular season to try to get that record, build the record up, and then once you get into the tournament, thinking if you're a number 1 seed going into your tournament, I'm not sure if you lose, if you don't make it to your champion, knock you down. It could. So I guess if you're Duke or Virginia, that's some extra incentive because that would be nice as far as traveling, and then of course the Final Four. If you're a Virginia fan looking down the road, did we not say that the Final Four this year was in Georgia?
I haven't looked that up. I'll look it up while you're talking, but I think it's in
I'm
Atlanta
not
this year.
certain, but I thought I had seen that if it wasn't this year, certainly next year. But
yeah, let me look this up real quick.
Anyway, it just makes it easier for you.
It's actually it's in Minnesota this year. It's in Atlanta next year.
Okay, so the first two rounds is important. Makes it easier for your fan base to follow. We've been to the first two rounds games, and we know when you play closer to home, like Raleigh or Charlotte or somewhere like that, Jimmy takes a ton of fans with him. So I guess there is some extra incentive to try to keep your record and build your record up and maintain that number one spot.
So now here's the part of the podcast where I warn our listeners, again, knowing that you're UVA fans, I'm going to warn you that Duke is good, and not just the way ESPN says they're good. All ESPN does is show you highlights of Zion Williamson dunking the ball, and that's fine. That looks impressive. But where Duke, I've watched Duke play several times this year, and I don't usually watch Duke much until ACC play, but I know this matchup with Virginia, these two games with Virginia, are going to be so important. I wanted to know as much about this Duke team as I could before that first matchup comes up January 19th, just a couple weeks away. What impresses me about Duke is this team plays defense. The last year's team didn't play defense. In fact, of their last 5 teams in the one-and-done era, only the team that won the championship in 2015, has played top 10 level defense. But this team plays defense. They're third nationally in defensive efficiency. And I think a key to that is that their best players, those 3 freshmen, Zion Williamson, R.J. Barrett, Cam Reddish, they play a little bit like Virginia. Their best players are interchangeable defensively. Those 3 guys can all defend all 5 positions on the floor, and they're all actually ranked in the top 20 in the ACC in defensive rating, as is Jack White, a reserve power forward center. And Javin DeLaurier, who's now starting for them, would be ranked in the top 20 if he played enough minutes. He's under 20 minutes a game and has the cutoff line. So this Duke team, unlike last year's Duke team, actually plays defense. And also scheduling, they didn't play any true road games, which is what Coach K does in November and December. He didn't care. He doesn't have to play road games if he doesn't want to. But they did play Texas Tech in Madison Square Garden here a couple weeks ago. And the only reason they played that game was because Texas Tech doesn't play the pack line defense, but they do play a really smothering man-to-man defense, and they play a slower pace with older guys. It was totally a trial run to get ready for UVA, so get his team ready for UVA, and they won the game. It was a tight game, but they won the game in the end. So, this is a great setup. I think these two teams match up so well. You got 3 Duke freshmen who are all looked at as NBA players. You got 3 UVA guys who are third-year players. Hunter is technically a redshirt sophomore because he redshirted that first year, but he came in the same recruiting class as Ty Jerome and Kyle Guy. You got 3 UVA guys who are NBA players. But they're 2 years older, 2 years more mature physically and basketball-wise. So that's what we're looking forward to in January and February. The January games in Durham, the February games in Charlottesville. Both on Saturdays. I can presume they're going to be game day kind of situations for ESPN. But a lot of similarities between these two teams in personnel, which I think is very interesting because Duke has the one and dones and Virginia's got the older guys. But other than that, they're very similar in terms of matchups. I think I've lost Scott. Scott, if you can hear me, I can't hear you right now. So,
I'm here, Chris. I'm sorry. I have seen Duke play on TV a couple of times. They do look differently defensively. I think they.
And now I've lost Scott, and I'm going to try to call him back as we're talking here. This happens. Scott is on the road as we're talking here, so I'm going to see if I can get Scott back on the phone here. But yeah, they do look different defensively. I would agree with that. And it's the man-to-man defense. There you go. Go ahead, Scott.
I'm not saying that this is a Duke. I don't think this is the same. I'm not saying this is the same type of defensive team that we've seen Duke play years ago, but it's a better team defensively than what the last couple of years. But again, I go back to when the curtain rises for that NCAA tournament and the bright lights are really the brightest. I'd rather go with the guys that we're going to be rolling out there that have been there, played in that situation. It's always going out playing with guys that, that I don't care how good they are, it's still a new experience for them. So, I think in the end, I'd rather go with a little more experienced team, like what Virginia's going to have, with the experience of what we're going to have out on the floor than what Duke's going to have. We also wondered, by that time of the year, these one and dones, is their hearts really in it? Are they? How much intestinal fortitude do you think they have to win a championship for a school that clearly, they've just been there for one thing, to just play, to get better, to play in front of scouts? How important is that to them? And are they going to really be playing at that level, knowing that their college career is only a couple of games, 2-3 games from being over, and they don't want to risk injury? I think those are factors that you have to, those are intangibles that you do not consider.
I would say the 2015 team had one and dones and they won, and they want to go out there and win. I think the reason the Duke teams in this one and done era that haven't gone on like that 2015 team did isn't because of lack of effort. It's because of lack of defense. Those groups weren't committed defensively, and this team seems to be. And I think the big issue for this Duke team isn't heart or anything like that. I think what it is R.J. Barrett, and he's the guy who thinks he is the number one pick. Of course, all three of those kids think they're the number one pick. Cam Reddish is crazy to think he's the number one pick, but I think they all think that they're going to be number one picks. And but the difference is that Williamson is so effective in the post, even though he's 6'7". He kind of reminds me, and when I compare him to this, I'm sure there'd be Duke fans out there listening. And there's none listening at this stage, 41 minutes into a UVA podcast. But if they were listening, they'd say, well, you're comparing him to Zach Randolph? But that's who he reminds me of. Maybe Charles Barkley, but I don't want to compare him to a Hall of Famer quite yet. He's only 18 years old. But he's a smaller guy in terms of being as effective as he is in the post. 6'7" shouldn't be effective in the post, but he is. Kind of like Randolph, kind of like a Barkley, because of his size. He's 6'7", but he's 280. Those guys were 6'7", 260, 265. He's their most effective player, if you ask me, by far their most effective player. And I'm looking at stats here. He's shooting 65% from the field. He doesn't shoot threes well, but he shoots 65% from the field the way he does, but he's only shooting 11 times a game. Barrett is shooting 19 times a game and shoots a lot of threes. He shoots 6 threes a game, only shoots them 31%. Think back to Duke's loss this year. They lost to Gonzaga in Maui, and the final play of that game, they're down 2, final possession, and Gonzaga doubles him. And logically, when you get doubled, you look for somebody else, but he drove down the middle of the lane and threw a wild shot up at the buzzer and missed. That, to me, is a microcosm of what could be wrong with this Duke team, is that they can't, no matter what Coach K says, when they're out there on the floor, the ball's in the hands of Barrett because he is, he's the guy, he's effectively Trey Jones is the point guard, but Barrett's got the ball in his hands in key moments. And if he doesn't give it up, Williamson can't just go get it from him. So, I think when Duke when Duke loses some games this year, it's going to be because Barrett is throwing wild shots up, and now you bring that to a level of playing against Virginia, a disciplined team like Virginia. Virginia plays well against guys who are perimeter-based players who think that they should shoot the ball 20 times a game. That doesn't work against Virginia very well. So I think that's going to be a problem for them in those 2 games, and I think it'll be a problem for them in some big games. If Barrett can decide that, hey, I don't need to shoot the ball every time I have it in my hands, Duke will be a good team. I don't know if that's going to happen for this team this year in big games. I think he's going to be a liability for them. And again, I've dazzled Scott with my analysis. As I mentioned, there you go.
Chris, a side note, if anyone's out there listening and they do not have a ticket or season ticket to the Duke game, they're pretty easy to get. If you go on StubHub, if you don't mind setting somewhere like 20,000 feet above sea level in John Paul Jones Arena, you can get a ticket for about $300. If you want to set down lower, they're practically giving them away at $1,200 space.
Yeah. So get your tickets now, right? And they're only going to go up between now and game day. So But because
Thanks for your kids' education. If you have a couple and you want to get rid of them.
exactly. That is a way to finance a trip around the world. Yeah, your kids' education, your retirement could be giving up your tickets for that game.
A bunch of money in the stock market the last couple of months. There's a way to get it back, but you know what? I doubt if anybody's holding tickets to the Duke game, they're really thinking about that. They're going to keep those tickets.
Yeah, if I would cash your Bitcoin out now if I were you, just because of the declines in the market there. But these are going to be great games, and I hopefully they live up to the hype, because I think you could have. I mean, you could have a couple of one of these matchups could be 1 versus 2 nationally if service held, using the tennis terminology, and the matchup is such a clash in styles, the up tempo of Duke, the more measured pace of Virginia. They both play good defense. They both have NBA talent on the floor. 2 of the best coaches in the game, matching wits against each other. The versatility of both teams. And what it will come down to, as usually is the case in games like this, there will be a bench guy who does something special that will probably determine the outcome of these games. But the stakes are the ACC, potential number 1 seed, chance to go to the Final Four. I mean, all these things are at stake in these 2 games. And of course, there are other games to be played too. I think, obviously the Florida State game this weekend is a big test for Virginia. We'll really see for the first time in a while, really since I guess the VCU game. That was a good test for this Virginia team. So the first time in weeks, and certainly maybe the Maryland and Wisconsin games back to back against 2 quality opponents. First test for Virginia in a while. I think the Virginia Tech home and home this year will be interesting. This Tech team is a lot better than you think. When you look at the efficiency numbers, they're ranked 4th in the nation offensively, 33rd defensively, but that's a big improvement. Last year, Tech was ranked 70th defensively, so. And of course, they did beat Virginia, one of the 3 teams that beat Virginia last year, so those games will be good matchups. I'm thinking, Scott, so I wanted to ask you your opinion on this. Here's my thoughts. Now, I'm actually going to let you go first, and then I'll tell you what I think, because I don't want to influence you. Who do you have for the 4 double byes in the ACC tournament in Charlotte in March? Who do you have getting those double byes?
Well, first 2 are easy. Virginia, Duke. I think somehow or another, just the nature of the number of blue chip recruits they're going to have out there, North Carolina will be that third. I think Virginia, North Carolina, Duke, and Florida State. That's going to be my 4 picks for the double-double.
Well, see, and now this is boring because I'm going to agree with you. I've got all 4. I look at Carolina, and the reason I go with Carolina is now they're 9-3, and so you'd say the record doesn't reflect that quite yet, but you look at their efficiency numbers again. They played the toughest ACC preseason schedule, the non-conference schedule, and you look at their efficiency numbers. Number 7 offensively, number 16 defensively, indication that they're on the cusp of being a Final Four team at this stage of the season. So I lean to them as to me a lock. I'm gonna put them in my lock category right now for double bye, and I'm leaning towards Florida State, even though I gave you those great numbers about Virginia Tech being 4th offensively, particularly. Florida State is number 24 on offense, number 24 on defense in the Ken Pom rankings right now. But I'm going with them right now because, in part, they played all but 3 games this season without arguably their best player, Phil Kofer. He had a right foot injury in the preseason. He's only been back, like I said, the last 3 games. He started 1 game, their most recent win over, I'm losing who that was. It was Wofford or Winthrop, a team with a W. So he's just now kind of getting his legs back under him. But all those efficiency numbers are without their best player. They've only played 3 games with him this year, and so I think that'll be a big boost for them, especially as he gets his legs under him. I'm not sure if it's going to be. He's not going to be at 100% effectiveness necessarily on Saturday against Virginia, but as he works his way into basketball shape, so to speak, next few weeks, that Florida State team's already pretty good. I think they'll be better, but Virginia Tech. I think those 2 teams only play once this year. It's at Tallahassee, and it's on March 5th, the final week of the regular season. And so that could be a matchup for that number 4 spot if we're thinking if things go the way we're thinking. And so I think those 2 teams will be 4 and 5. I think NC State will be a clear 6th in this conference this year. But yeah, it should be fun to see who gets that 4th spot. I think the top 3 are pretty set, but I think the 4th spot could come down to Florida State, Virginia Tech. I like you, Scott. I'm going Florida State.
I just, I think those 4 teams are going to stand out over an 18-game schedule. The cream will rise to the crop. And if you're listening to this podcast this long, and I'm going to further suggest those listeners to a little more real analytical stuff. I don't like the format of the double bye. I think that penalizes those teams from 5 maybe down to 10 or 11 because they're having to play an extra game. I'd rather see, and I'm sure once you do go to a 20-game schedule, something's going to change. I think you're penalizing that group in the middle by allowing those teams that have no shot at winning the championship and playing that many games. You're penalizing those teams in the middle by rewarding those teams that finish 14, 15, 16 down in that category. I'd rather see those teams just not make the tournament and then maybe a single bout, a bye, and then go from there. I don't like this current format, but I guess we're stuck with it at least for another year.
Well, if you did that, you'd have to cut everybody from 8 on down because that'd be the only way you play 3 straight through. And so then if you were 9th, and we've had 9 teams in the tournament. Last year we had 9 teams in the tournament. Then you're cutting those teams out from even being in the tournament. And also, from a business standpoint, every game is more revenue for ESPN, for ticket sales. And so, like it or not, they're not going to give games up from a rating standpoint or from a ticket sales standpoint. So I understand your point.
It's all revenue driven.
Yeah, it's about money, and that's why we make all the money. The schools make all the money anyway. We make a little bit, but they make more than we do. And for us, when we're going to be in Charlotte, which I'll go ahead and tease, we haven't applied for the credentials, but we get them every year. We'll be in Charlotte. We just got back from Charlotte. Of course, we were there for the Belk Bowl this past weekend, but we'll be back in uptown Charlotte. Hey, we returned from Charlotte and didn't lose a game, so that's a good thing. Scott and I even went to the Spectrum Center and watched a basketball game that UVA didn't play. It was an NBA game. So there's some good, positive memories leaving Charlotte. And we'll be back March 12th through the 16th. The AFP business office, represented by Crystal Graham's, already reserved the room, so we're set as far as that goes. And, of course, we're looking for sponsors. So if you want to have your name attached to all of our stories, and we'll only write about 1,000 stories that week because there are all those games, all the previews you got to do, all the columns you have to do after games, all the podcasts we do. You'll have your name out there a good bit. If you want to sponsor, actually contact Scott, contact Crystal, and they'll get you hooked up. But we're already looking ahead to that because it's going to be a interesting tournament, certainly with all the stakes that we've laid out here on this podcast for you on the line. And then, of course, we're hopefully heading, well, if things go to schedule, we'll be heading to Columbia, we'll be heading to Washington, D.C., and then we're going to get on a plane and go to Minneapolis, where actually my wife, she's a Minnesota native, so we'll be hopefully heading back in time for her. I'm going to think positively, Scott, in that sense, and so we have a lot to look forward to as we're getting ready to start ACC play and head on down the rest of the season.
It's right around the corner, yet it doesn't seem like it. It seems like it's years away because we know how grueling the ACC regular season schedule is, and we haven't even started. We start for real Saturday. So I'm enjoying a couple more days of relaxation before we start getting into that battle.
Yeah, because this is when we start getting nervous twice a week for the duration, basically, until April. And those nerves take years off of our lives at the end, which is okay because I'd rather use them now than use them when I'm 90 years old. But yeah, this is the time of year when we all start biting our fingernails and we all curse a lot at TV screens. And for me, there's extra Fireball in the cupboard to keep me calm down after games. So yeah, this is a fun time of year. This is what we live for, and we're getting ready to start it right here. So. Any final thoughts, Scott, as we get ready to sign off here on this podcast?
Well, if you're not if you are not stoked about basketball season by now, then you're probably a hopeless lost cause, and go get yourself some good books and settle in for a long winter. For guys like us, it's what gets us through to spring training.
Well, there is that, and yeah, baseball season not that far off. But you know what? I actually live for basketball season. It's the one sport I don't broadcast. I broadcast football and soccer and baseball, but this is the sport I live for. So if you couldn't tell that from Scott and I here in this podcast, almost an hour in, then well, we didn't do our job, but I think we did. So for Scott German, I'm Chris Graham signing off. Wahoo wah.